call for me, and maybe there no moaning at the bar when I put out to sea. But such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam, when that which drew from out the boundless deep turns again home. Twilight and evening bell, and after that the dark, and may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. For though from out or born of time and place, the flood may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar. Just a few words on a very long friendship with Nick. Mostly a great friendship, but there were fractious moments in it, that's for sure. Anybody that knew Nick knew we had our moments. I met him when he was a wine rep in the early 70s. He was working for another deceased member here, John Roach. And of all the wine reps that would come into the restaurant with me, he was the only one that knew something about wine. Everybody else was selling drink. And Nick and I would sit down over cups of coffee and we'd discuss the finer world of wine. By the way, that was French. There was no other place. It started with Bordeaux, went to Burgundy, went to Loire, but it never went to Chile or Argentine or any of those places, that's for sure. So he came into me one day and said, I'm off now, I'm taking the big plunge, I'm going to open my own place. And I said, oh, fantastic, Nick, where's that? Where are you going to open? He said, Dundee. I said, where's that? So I was trying to tell him, you know, Howth is bad enough, we're out in the extremes, but Dundee is really far out, you know. But the best of luck and everything good. That's when we first started to meet Catherine. When the restaurant was open, there were a group of us restaurateurs at the time. John and Catherine Howard, Henry and Catherine O'Neill, Alexis Fitzgerald, Patrick Ebo occasionally, Mary Bow, and a couple more people. There weren't that many of us around in the 70s, and one of our quests was for information, always the passion for food, the passion for drink, and we'd always be getting together whenever we could to absolutely bore ourselves silly talking about food and wine, and food and wine, and wine and wine and wine. And you know, lunches would go on for 10 or 12 hours. I remember one occasion up in Dundee, fantastic summer day, and all the vegetables were picked that morning. Even at sort of the lunchtime, after lunch, Catherine went off to pick some Frais de Bois, the wild strawberries, and had the cream whipping it away there. Nick had spent 4 days making the consommé, which was absolutely divine. And Joan and myself were lucky enough to be able to stay overnight with them, because they used to often let us stay there instead of driving home. And I think at about 2 o'clock in the morning, Nick and I were still fighting over how to best prepare a fish or something. And one of the things I remember he was trying to convince me of, or him, I'm not quite sure which way it was, but if we cooked peas in the pod, they'd be better. So at 2 o'clock in the morning we were cooking peas in the pod. Don't ask me how it ended up. Dundee was absolutely run perfectly. It was a fantastic place to be there, and Nick had his ways and regulations of doing things. He would definitely have given John Cleese a load of paragraphs to work with. A couple of the things that I can remember, there was an ex-member here, unfortunately he's gone his way as well, Ian Morrison. And Nick had on his menu, no smoking pipes or cigars until 10 o'clock or whenever. Ian, of course, produces the pipe out of the pocket. And Nick goes up to her and tells her, you better sit with your driver outside if you want to smoke that. Little did he know that in later life he would be sailing and minding Ian and his boat for a few years in the late 90s or early 2000s. One of the other ones that I can remember classically saying, "Sir, that's a saucer, not an ashtray, which was not designed for ashes," etc. And I remember him saying to one poor woman, said, "I'll have one of those white wines and black things." Is Madam referring to a Keir? And he continued to give the life of Keir. And how the brand of cassis that was to be used, and I think the poor woman was just dying for a drink. But that was the way Dundee was run, that was the way it was, and it was a fantastic place to be. When they got their star in '86, we were all absolutely inferred. We all thought we were going to get one, of course, but we didn't get to the plate which they set, and we were really enthusiastic about them having it. As it only lasted 4 short years, and then poor Catherine passed away, or not passed away, but got ill. And I remember Henry O'Neill setting up a sort of a system with a group of us chefs to try and go up there and work for a couple of days while Catherine was ill. But Catherine was very much always thinking of Nick, always thinking of the future for him. And they set up a Dundee Food Company. And they were hoping to get into sous vide. Sous vide was the beginning of the cooking into plastics and so on, and go out and sell this. And they set up a little kitchen in St. Paul's up in Christchurch area, and then got into the soup business. And I'll say very little about the soup business, but we were all left in the soup afterwards. That didn't really work. There was a couple of things Nick couldn't handle very well. I think that was people that argued against him or didn't agree with them, and money. And it sort of fizzled in and out, that sort of end of his life. And this was a period of time really that sometimes I could get very angry with him, because he really had an encyclopedic knowledge of food and wine. He was literally fantastic. And for several years he just sort of couldn't handle that. And obviously with the grief without Catherine was the reason. But we had all hoped that he would come back and relive that sort of life again. And at the end it was thanks to David Moynihan, who set up the allotment which Andrew spoke about, that sort of gave him the passion back again. And himself and David Cagney, an aspirant master chef at the time for Ireland, and they would start those arguments that we were having 20 years ago. They were still onto them about how the best poached egg and all the various other things. And I really thank them for igniting that passion in him again. But the other passion he had, which was all the years that I'd known him, he came out, I was 17, he came out and sailed with me once and made a fantastic lunch after it. And he brought me down to sail on the Shannon One design, and we were blown out, so we had another fantastic lunch. But we never really discussed sailing. And we'd gone through years and years of happiness and torment and everything else. But then I just said to him one day, "Nick, would you like to come out in Changeling and we'll go sailing?" And I think that was in '96. And to find out that he was just at his home on a boat as he was in his garden. And from here on, let Kieran take over and give you his sailing life. Thank you.
As Aidan said, Nick joined Changeling in the company of fellow restaurateurs for a weekend sailing in mid-90s. This was my first meeting. Over that weekend he talked of his passion for the Shannon One design, of which he was a part owner in one with Andrew and others. We also discussed some of his past sailing, and that included his crewing on a Dublin Bay 21-footer Maureen, which coincidentally in the early 60s was owned by my late father. A few sails later, it became clear to me that Nick was seeking a change in life and wished to try a nautical career. In true Nick style, he qualified and obtained his Yachtmaster certificate in record-breaking time, thus ready to start a new career as a yacht delivery